9 years ago, Ben Cooley was working as a voice coach after training as an opera singer. At the age of 26, he became engaged in the battle against people trafficking, and he founded a charity called Hope for Justice, which has now saved hundreds from modern slavery. He's written a book about it, and he's been talking to Kevin Bouquet.
I've come to Huddersfield in West Yorkshire. I'm on an industrial estate where there is a large, sprawling factory that makes beds. I'm standing across the road. I'm with Ben Cooley, who several years ago set up a charity. It's called Hope for Justice. Ben, it's a miserable morning. We're huddled under umbrellas, but tell me, why have you brought me here?
This is the site where we identified victims of modern-day slavery, one of the largest cases that we have ever dealt with in the UK. In July 2013, we started working with an individual that identified as a modern-day slave. We realised that there were many more victims, upwards of 30 individuals that were involved in this case.
And to what extent were they being exploited?
They were held in squalid conditions, 50 of them sharing a two-bedroomed house. They were withheld food, constant intimidation, and our team witnessed for several weeks these individuals being dropped off at this factory at 5 o'clock in the morning in a white transit van, this group of dishevelled human beings that had lost all sense of hope and humanity.
And how long each day were they working?
5 o'clock in the morning till late at night, 7 days a week.
And what were they being paid?
They weren't paid anything.
Nothing at all?
Nothing at all. They'd come from different parts of Eastern Europe and were working in the supply chains of some of the largest retailers here in the UK.
Ben Cooley and his team worked closely with the police, and in due course the owner of the factory and the two men who'd supplied the labour, the human traffickers, were given jail sentences. The court was told the factory's customers included several well-known chain stores. I've come to meet a man who we'll call Adash, who tells me he left Poland over 4 years ago because he couldn't find work and he didn't get on with his family. A friend offered him a place on a minibus travelling to the UK. There was no charge. When they arrived, they were collected by two men who turned out to be brothers and taken to a house in which there was no furniture except for beds and mattresses. He said that eventually there were 20 of them living in the house. It was cramped and uncomfortable. After a number of different jobs working in factories and on farms, Adash says he was put to work in a garage owned by the two brothers. He was ordered to work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, often sleeping on a sofa at the garage. He was paid £30 a week. Why didn't you just leave and go and get a job elsewhere? He felt there was no escape. The brothers had taken all his documents, including his passport. He said they had around 50 or 60 people working for them, every one of them a modern-day slave.
Hello, Hope for Justice, Joel speaking. How can I help? Yes, okay. Whereabouts are you now?
I've come to one of Hope for Justice's offices. It's in Bradford. I'm not allowed to say exactly where, but I'm with Joel Green. He's worked for the charity for 3 years. Before that, he spent 14 years as a police officer with West Yorkshire Police. What have you been doing today?
Today we've been dealing with a reactive rescue. I was a young man, about 18, 19 years old. This call came in yesterday. It was quite urgent because the referral partner in Manchester actually told us that the traffickers were actually actively searching for him. So there was quite an urgency that we had to get to him yesterday afternoon.
And of the people that you help, in what sort of activities are most of them involved? Is it factory work? Is it agricultural work?
Quite a broad spectrum, really. The majority of our rescues, so to speak, are victims of forced labour, but we do deal with a high number of victims who have been victim of domestic servitude, so working in domestic households, also sexually exploited victims, mainly females, working in pop-up brothels, but also being controlled by organised crime groups.
Sarah, you had direct experience of the sort of thing Joel's talking about.
Yes, I did. It was involving a 19-year-old Polish female who was trafficked to the UK for sexual exploitation, thinking that she was coming to work in a hotel. She had her family members threatened with violence and she was literally kept under lock and key until she managed to escape one day. We obviously helped her, but it was very intense leading up to that because the traffickers were indeed looking for her. She had tracking devices on her iPad that we had to go out and disable.
There was a gentleman earlier this year who, when we actually started interviewing him, One of the questions obviously is, how long have you been in your area of exploitation for? And he said, well, I've been here in the UK for 30 years, but I've pretty much been exploited for 28 of those, which is a lifetime, really.
28 years?
28 years. He'd basically been kept as a slave all around different parts of the UK, and he just so happened to end up here in Bradford, whereupon he was passed to us.
Ben Cooley, you set up this charity 9 years ago. It's grown amazingly. Clearly, human trafficking is operating on a massive scale.
It is indeed. Worldwide, over 21 million people are caught in slavery, and we believe that is just the tip of the iceberg. Wherever we are in the UK, we are finding victims of modern-day slavery.
Let's go back to that example that we were talking about earlier. This is the bed manufacturers. Some of those beds were being sold to high street names, companies like John Lewis and Next. How much responsibility should they bear for what's happening here?
One of the things that Theresa May has done through the Modern Slavery Bill was Article 54, which insists on every company that has a turnover of 36 million or more to start identifying where their risks are for addressing slavery in the supply chains.
The young man we're calling Adash was lucky. He met someone from Hope for Justice and within days had escaped into a new life. But even though the two brothers who exploited him are now serving time, Adash would not tell us his real name for fear that one day they might track him down. He told me that words could not express the gratitude he felt towards Hope for Justice.
I would say that I have been motivated by my Christian faith. I'd also say that many of our staff come from many faiths and no faith. And I think there's something in me and something in all of us that wants to live in a world free from slavery. None of us want children in our country that are being bought and sold. None of us want women exploited on the streets and men in factories and in car washes. So I think there's something in me that's, yes, from faith, but from a human aspect that says, I want to create a world, a design a world that has no slavery in it.
Ben Cooley ended that report by Kevin Bouquet.